in Dallas with victory in his grasp. Chase Sexton, instead, handed the win and the sole points lead to Cooper Webb. Sexton was in line to win the overall by simply checking up and following Webb to the line. Instead, his baffling propensity to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory again reared its ugly head. A double whammy of miscues in the third and final race, again stalling his bike to cough up the lead, and then ensuring yet another Webb win by running into his back tire in an ill-fated and completely unnecessary pass attempt. Had he only settled for second in the third Triple Crown race, Chase would still have the red plate, and Cooper wouldn't. Webb pulled his typical early turn down in the 180-degree right-hand turn, a move we have seen him craft and perfect over and over. Sexton, with nowhere to go, tucked his front end, clipped into the side of Webb, and descent to the ground, where he was promptly run over by Mitchell Harrison, who was a lap down. After losing 2 positions to Jason Anderson and Ken Roxon, insult to injury as pseudo-teammate Justin Barcia bam-bammed him back to 5th. A pivotal 7th round in the 17-race championship fight. For the second time in the last 3 rounds, an almost sure win for Sexton was fumbled away. Sexton actually ran into the back of 2 Coopers on the night, having clipped then leader Justin Cooper in the second race with similar results. If you cast the battle to come as Chase's superior speed versus Webb's superlative racecraft. In 2019, Cooper left Dallas with the points lead and never looked back. 6 years later, the song might well remain the same. Eli Tomac was notably faster than Webb in both 19 and 2021, with both titles going to Cooper. Now still faster than he was then, Webb is the fox in the henhouse in this title chase. The antecedents of motorcycle racing at Daytona Beach predate the birth of Supercross, motocross itself, and certainly the first super speedways of NASCAR. Early board track racing aside, and the obvious being that the first motorcycle race ever held likely took place as soon as the second motorcycle was even built, racing at Daytona is nearly as old as racing motorcycles. Motorcycle racing has been a tradition at the beach since January 24th, 1937, the inaugural running of the Daytona 200. The first race took place on a 3.2-mile beach and road course located just south of Daytona Beach. Ed Kretz of Monterey Park, California, was its first winner, riding an American-made Indian and averaging 73.34 miles per hour. That early race course ran approximately 1.5 miles north on the beach, through a quarter-mile turn where the sand was banked, and then onto a paved public roadway for the trip south. Coming back on the final turn, another high sandbank awaited riders as they raced on the hard sands of the beach. Starting times were actually dictated by the local tide tables, as it wouldn't do to have the lapping surf overtake the course mid-race. The races continued from 1937 to 1941. In the early years, the Daytona 200 was also called the Handlebar Derby by local racing scribes. In 1942, the Daytona 200 was discontinued because of the Second World War. With the war came a general rationing of fuel, tires, and key engine components. Even though the racing event was officially called off, people still showed up for an unofficial party called Bike Week. On February 24th, 1947, the famous motorcycle race resumed and was now promoted by the legendary Bill France of NASCAR fame. Newspaper stories of the period recount that the city fathers asked townsfolk to open their homes to the visiting motorcyclists because all the hotel rooms and camping areas were filled to capacity.
And now for the thrills and spills of the Daytona races in the United States of America. Here, the course consists of a 2-mile straight along the famous beach and a parallel straight along a metalled road. The straights are joined at the end by banked corners where riders slide their machines and where also most of the spills happen.
In 1948, a new beach road course was used due to ongoing commercial developments along the beach. Organizers were forced to move the event further south, towards Ponce Inlet. The new circuit measured 4.1 miles. The last Daytona 200 to be held on the beach road course took place in 1960. In 1961, the famous race was moved to the Daytona International Speedway. When motocross racing first came to the Speedway, that's what it was: motocross. In fact, motocross racing in the Speedway predates the National Motocross Series itself. In 1971, the Daytona race was a standalone, unsanctioned event. The 1971 racetrack was actually built across parking areas at the backside of the infield, but the location would be moved to Trioval the next year, where it still is today. In 1972, Daytona races were held as part of the Florida Winter Am Series, with AMA Pro Motocross only becoming a thing later in that year. Things that come full circle department. That first 1971 Daytona motocross event was actually won by Gunnar Lindstrom, father of current Team Honda manager Lars. Motocross, now dubbed as Supercross at the venue, has run at the Speedway in every year since, making it the oldest continuous street for a professional motocross track anywhere. The 1973 race was not only still billed as Moto, it served as the opening round for the sophomore season of the fledgling AMA Pro Motocross Championship. Yamaha had imported Dutch Grand Prix rider Pierre Karsmakers for the 1973 season, and Pierre left little time making his mark on American motocross. He won outright over his U.S. competition, winning not only his first 500cc national stateside, but also giving Yamaha what might be considered their first ever Premier Class win as well. In the 250 class, Bob Grossi on a Husqvarna swam upstream against the influx of newer and lighter Japanese machinery to take his one and only pro motocross win. The very next year, the scenery was the same, but the chase had changed. After having hosted the opening round of the outdoor season previous year, the 1974 race would kick off the brand spanking new AMA Supercross schedule for its inaugural campaign. France had brought on Houston Astrodome short track TT promoter Alan Becker to start the new series. Neither might have dreamed that Supercross would one day be the biggest off-road racing series in the world. Karsmakers sort of repeated his win from the year before, and earned another first that day, Yamaha's first Supercross win. The Supercross series was already veering towards 250cc machines, being more suited to the tighter confines of stadiums, so Karsmakers would switch from the open class, leaving the door open for visiting Belgian Roger de Coster, then a 3-time World 500cc champion before going on to win 5, to take his one and only Supercross win. 1976 would mark the emergence of a cocky upstart kid from the rugged Southern California desert. Bob Hanna had stormed through the Florida Winter Am Series with an unprecedented wide-open feet-off-the-pegs approach to going fast, leading almost as legendary Cycle News writer Jim the Greek Giannottis to dub him with the moniker Hurricane. Coming off a veritable sweep of the Winter Am events, with 4 successive wins in Orlando, Gainesville, Cocoa Beach, and St. Petersburg. Many thought Hanna would also steamroll the competition at Daytona. Pennsylvanian Suzuki rider thought different. Hanna had been racing the 500 class and dropped down to the 250 for the Supercross. The rider who had been just as dominant as Hanna in the winter aims, but already in the 250 class, was another rising star, the son of a motorcycle shop owner, named Tony Stefano. Hanna crashed in each of the 3 motos, the Daytona format of the day. There's nothing new under the sun. And finished a lowly 10th overall. Tony D's 2-2-1 finishes were the winning formula. Hanna would come back the next year with a vengeance, winning Daytona along with Atlanta on his way to the 1977 Supercross Championship. Team Honda's rise to dominance had begun, however, and in 1978 the trio of Marty Tripes, Marty Smith, and Jimmy Ellis swept the podium, giving us a reason to show this very cool win ad from Cycle News. That 1978 win for Tripes was the first of Team Honda's rings. The team wouldn't win another race at Daytona for 4 years. Then the dam broke open. California's Darrell Schultz, who had won Daytona the previous year on a Suzuki, had switched to Team Honda. His victory in 1982 marked the beginning of an 11-year run of the table for Red Riders. Bob Hanna returned to the top of the podium in '83, his second win at the Speedway, and would garner the final Supercross win of his career in Daytona 2 years later. The son of the track builder, David Bailey, won the 1984 race. Ricky Johnson took his first of 2 wins in Daytona in 1986, then won again in '88, split by privateer Ricky Ryan, who, though not a member of Team Honda, nonetheless rode his CR250 to the win in 1987. Which brings us to Jeff Stanton. Now, Eli Tomac is considered the king of Daytona, but Stanton once held that crown. A bulldog of a rider who had risen to relative prominence campaigning Yamaha's Airhammer YZ490 on the national circuit, Stanton had been recruited to be Johnson's understudy at Team Honda, but quickly became the man of the hour after RJ's career-ending wrist injury occurred some 90 miles west of the Speedway at the Gatorback Cycle Park in Gainesville. Stanton won 4 straight Daytona Supercross events from 1989 through 1992. 1993, of course, marked the emergence of one Jeremy McGrath, who began his dominant run inside the stadiums of America. Not, however, at the Speedway. Kawasaki's workhorse Mike Kudrowski picked up where Stanton had left off and won 3 straight Daytona races from 1993 through 1995. If you need a point of reference on just how rough the Speedway Supercross was in those days, Kudrowski serves nicely. The future Hall of Famer won 4 national motocross championships, 30 combined national and Supercross wins. But of those 30 wins, only 5 came in Supercross, 3 of those in Daytona. And most said that Daytona, then still ran in the daytime, was too long and that the track was too rough for a Supercross specialist. But McGrath would never win at the Speedway. The Daytona Supercross race was much different in those days. Different than it is now, and certainly different from the other races on the schedule. Yes, it ran in the daytime. Generally it was hotter and more humid than most non-Floridians would anticipate, and lap times were often closer to 2 minutes long. In the era of 20-lap mains, the Daytona Supercross sometimes took 30 minutes for riders to complete. Also numbering 30 were the riders in the main, with the Daytona round opening up 10 additional spots for aspiring racers. It was a grinding test of man and machinery. Something that is difficult to describe. It kinda had to be there, and I was the ambiance of not just the Daytona Supercross, but North Florida in those days. Journeyman pros from the snow belt sofa surfing through the winter ends until the first week of March. Locals like me laughing in our helmets a bit when we passed those sometimes faster guys as they wilted in the Florida heat late in motos. The influx of name brand superstars, Stanton, Bradshaw, Bale, the lot, the local practice and private tracks and hidey holes we rode all year long. First came the Atlanta Supercross, then Gatorback, then Daytona the next weekend. And the Daytona 200 road race was held the very next day, not a week apart from the Supercross. So we'd have the outdoor opener at Gainesville, then it was off to bike week. I remember well the Suzuki semi being stuck in the trees at Jimmy Marchant's secret stash. Not to mention McGrath sucking the graphics off my radiator shrouds as he went around. Maybe Gatorback was the orphan national to the California boys of motocross action. Old men, even then. It was the culmination of dirt bike Mardi Gras for us locals. Anyway, McGrath couldn't win in Daytona. That was the talk. Then came 1996.
Center of racing, a world-renowned facility that has frustrated some great competitors. Dale Earnhardt, with 7 Winston Cup titles, has yet to win the greatest race of all, the Daytona 500. Jeremy McGrath can relate to that, for despite his 3 AMA 250 Supercross championships, his resume still lacks the most important victory of all, the Daytona Supercross by Honda.
Here's the one everybody's waiting to see, Jeremy McGrath. 3 AMA Supercross crowns, but not Daytona.
Jeremy McGrath last year was knocked down at the start, got up and finished 7th from dead last. He does not intend to have that happen again. But the best position on the gate has gone to his teammate Steve Lamson, number 4.
Well, that didn't work to Lammy's favor as Jeff Emick and Jeremy McGrath are the first 2 over our camera.
What a gorgeous start Jeremy McGrath had. There he is in 2nd spot on the red number 1, chasing Emick.
Here's Emick and there's McGrath.
Opening lap of 20. It's a long race on a long racetrack.
Steve, we talked early on about how Emick wanted to set a tone for McGrath. These two have gone at it all season long, but McGrath had no problems getting past Jeff Emick on the first lap. That's interesting because Jeremy has accused Emick all season long of running some pretty creative lines while trying to hold on to the lead.
Boy, Emick got right up, tried to tuck a wheel under him. McGrath has such tremendous throttle control that he just squirted away.
If Jeremy McGrath can hang on, this will be his 7th AMA 250 Supercross win, and it will make him the guy with the record for the most Supercross wins in a row, unseating Bob Hanna and Rick Johnson, who he is currently tied with right now for 6th.
We don't have that much time left in this Daytona 250 Supercross by Honda. Jeremy McGrath, need we say, is out in front. And let's get an idea. That was McGrath. And here comes 2nd place. A 10-second interval. Already McGrath has lapped into the top 10.
McGrath is just amazing, Steve, and we are witnessing here today a piece of history. One of the greatest motorcycle racers of all time is Jeremy McGrath. There's no disputing that. But by winning here today, Jeremy McGrath will really solidify his place in the Supercross record books and motocross records as well, because to win Daytona is to finalize it. And what we just saw right there is something that Jeremy has been working on. That step-up jump, he learned to wheelie going up onto that jump, and it has really allowed him to pick up a lot of time here at Daytona.
And he is on the last lap of this race. And I think the questions about endurance and stamina have long since been answered. Jeremy McGrath has not even broken a sweat.
Former motocross star Gary Seamix out of the 70s is his personal trainer. Big tip of the visor to him, because he is the one that has put Jeremy through the rigorous training that has gotten him to this place.
And McGrath has not been without controversy. He's a bright kid. He's making a lot of money. He's enjoying himself while he can. He says what he thinks, wears what he thinks on his body or in his earlobes. It just doesn't much matter. I personally think that he's just a fine athlete and deserves everything he'll get out of this Daytona victory. Not even a big, spectacular finish, Ralph. He just took it. Well, now he's starting to dance a little bit. Just absolutely wonderful.
No knack-knacks needed here at Daytona, just a checkered flag. Here's Steve with Jeremy.
The king of Supercross has just added the giant gem to his crown. You pulverized him, Jeremy.
Yeah, I got a great start out there. I was in like second or third. Emmett gave me a couple fits there in the beginning, and we had a good race there, and just got by him over here in the start-finish line. I wanted to get out front as fast as I could and put some time in, and that's what I did.
Honda had won the 1978 race, then had that 11-year streak through the 80s and 90s, culminating in Stanton's 1992 win. Jeremy putting a Honda back in the winner's circle was the first of another 5 Daytona wins for Honda to come. McGrath would win again at the Speedway in 1998 and 2000, but not on a Honda. Jeff Emig won his only Daytona Supercross in 1997, his championship year. The new millennium would welcome a new king of Daytona, as Ricky Carmichael made his presence felt in the premier class. Carmichael had struggled indoors on the 250, but he would take his first ever premier class win at Daytona aboard a Kawasaki, and that would be the first of his 5 Speedway wins in 2000. Carmichael also won the next 3 straight Daytona races, then again in his final season in 2006. In 2004, the entire schedule of Bike Week was shifted, and the Supercross was moved from a daytime program to the night. The atmosphere of the event forever changed. It wasn't just moving the Supercross to a night show, it was moving it away from the then biggest road race in America, the Daytona 200. Club and support class road racing took place at the Speedway throughout the week, leading into a weekend that featured AMA Supercross and AMA Superbike racing on back-to-back days. Most of us were there for the duration, suffering the wrath of surly security guards and soaking up the early March sun. Glorious days. With Bike Week revamped, Supercross was moved to the week before the 200, which itself isn't what it used to be, alas. Due in part to lighting limitations, but also to continued infrastructure improvements in the Speedway infield, the overly long and rough race course began to shrink in size. Composition of the soil changed, with more and more clay being added to mix. It's still sandy, but it's nothing like it was in the early days. Gary Bailey digging ditches with a backhoe and calling it a track. Telephone poles buried under the sand for weeks. Not everything back when was butter, to be sure. Anyway, Chad Reed interrupted Ricky's run with back-to-back wins in 2004 and 2005, and would have had a third Daytona victory had his engine not expired at the 2008 event. Crowd favorite Kevin Windham was there to pick up the pieces and the win when Reedy's bike quit just a few turns from the finish line. Reed came back the next year to score his third and final Daytona win. Another hugely popular win for Honda came in 2018, when veteran racer and excellent Race Day Live edition Justin Brayton took his sole Supercross victory. James Stewart, who thankfully will be back in the booth on Saturday, can boast of the longest gap between Supercross wins, with victories in 2007 and 2012. Ryan Villapoto won 4 races in Daytona from 2010 through 2014, interrupted only by Stewart's win. But the undisputed present-day king of Daytona is Eli Tomac. Eli first won at the Speedway in 2016 and has taken the victory there every year since, aside from Brayton's surprise win and Jet last year. Just like stock car icon Richard Petty, Tomac has 7 Daytona wins. and county, one thinks. Alas, there's no chance of an 8th Daytona win for Eli Tomac. And with last year's winner, Jet Lawrence, also on the sidelines, the way could be clear for Cooper Webb to finally win his first at the Speedway. Though Sexton bested Webb last year in Daytona, with a third behind Lawrence and Tomac, and Webb following in fourth, that was Coop's worst ever Daytona finish. Take Tomac out of history's picture, and Webb would already have 4 Daytona wins as runner-up in 2019, 21, 22, and 23. The longer, rougher Daytona track could lend itself to Sexton's strengths, but at the same time presents more opportunity for his weaknesses to show. And if Chase's championship effort is lost in the end, he has no one to blame but himself, having now coughed up nearly a race win's worth of points in the 4 races he has thrown away. A 10-point swing. Instead of being 5 up with the red plate, Chase is 5 down. But it's bigger than that. Instead of seizing the momentum, now Sexton has ceded it. Sexton's fortunes arguably pivots on confidence, while Webb indisputably, absolutely, thrives upon it. In the wake of first Lawrence's absence, then Tomac's departure, Webb had to be rubbing his hands together like Ryan Villapoto back in the day, wondering if Sexton had resolved his every other week blunders. And now, Chase has fumbled not only 3 weeks in a row, but in half the races run this season thus far. In spite of being stuck in the gate at the start, the Detroit race was something of a hero ride for Sexton. But throwing away the overall in the final lap in Arlington was more hero to, well, not 0, but also not good. There isn't enough raw speed in the world to overcome continued mistakes, nor to overcome the confident consistency of the Cooper Webb. There just isn't. These aren't just racing incidents. They are, in fact, totally avoidable mental errors, lapses in judgment that are snowballing into a death knell for Sexton's championship chances. There are still 11 rounds to go in this Supercross season, but the die is likely cast. The writing on the wall outlined with the pattern we've seen played out over and over and over again. 5 points is insignificant at this juncture of the season, but it's a much bigger swing in other ways. Sexton may or may not struggle to overcome this string of early season errors, but it has to be further fueling Webb's already simmering fire. Can't hand him the title just yet. But one has to wonder, barring some sort of Donner Party mishap, if there's anything to stop the Webb wagon. Chase may very well be, in Jet Lawrence's absence, the fastest man on the track. But if he continues to make these unforced errors, it won't matter. And hey, if you like this video, please like this video. Maybe we'll tap the subscribe button. Leave a comment if you know how to type. Meanwhile, thanks for watching this.
And it was a duel till the end, and yeah, I don't know. I felt a little something at the end, and then next thing I know, I heard the crowd, and I was just in disbelief like everyone else. Yeah, I can't believe it. It's a lot of luck there, I guess, and something about this stadium. Maybe I'm Jerry's grandson I didn't know about, something like that. But man, it's incredible. I want to give it up to the good Lord.
Chase.
Yeah, there's not much to say. It's pretty embarrassing. Stalling it, going down, losing the overall, just it ain't gonna cut it. So yeah, we got a lot of work to do. Go work on the bike myself and come back for Daytona.
So might see you then.